Well, across Europe, voters seem to cast aside the old guard in favor of a fractured parliament. Remi Piet is a research associate at the Florida International University. His work focuses on the political economy and foreign policy. Remi, was this really about rejection of the status quo? Is that the big takeaway here?
Well, there's three big takeaways from the elections that happened over the last 3 days in Europe. The first one, as was mentioned, was the turnout to the vote. Traditionally, the European election is the one that is the least popular across Europe, but we've seen a surge in votes, levels that have not been reached in the last 25 years, showing an interest from the European populations in coming and deciding the future of the fate of the European Union development. And that's something that is fairly new. The second one is indeed the surge of nationalistic parties, but this should not be overstated. And one has to understand that if you have right now Le Pen, for example, in France, claiming that she has the #1 party in France, she actually lost votes. She went from 24% to 23% over the last 5 years. And more importantly, when you see of the different groups that won key victories in the nationalist side of the party equation, those actually will be eventually grouped into 3 different groups in the parliament that can't talk to each other. You have one which is the most well-known, which is the National Front with Salvini in Italy and some allies in Austria that have strong links with Russia. You also have the Polish nationalistic party, who actually main platform is a position of antagonism towards Russia, therefore they can't talk to each other. And you have the third one with Nigel Farage in the UK that has actually created a third group of nationalistic interests in Parliament that doesn't have any more in common with the other two. So you will not have a very strong opposition from nationalistic party that just represent in total 22% of the future parliament. So you still have 78% of pro-European parties in the parliament today.
Well, you covered a whole bunch of items in your first answer, and I want to narrow things down a bit here. You talked about the populist and far-right parties gaining ground, but gaining that ground and that surge was not as high or as much as some had predicted. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. The key surprise here was the rise of Liberal Democrats Party and Green parties. I mean, not only in France, where they got 14% of the votes, but also in Germany, you have in the Netherlands, in Ireland, key Green parties that actually won a series of seats. That's something that is historic in European Union politics. And more importantly, the surge of nationalistic parties, which is much more limited that some people feared, has been on the ashes of traditional conservative right-wing parties that have had a collapse in several countries. The Partido Popular in Spain, the Republicans in France. I mean, the former Sarkozy party is at 8% today. The Tories in the UK or Forza Italia in Italy, all those parties that had historically low. So the potential for nationalistic party to gain ground in the future is actually somewhat limited. The big winners are definitely the Liberal Democrats of Macron or Verhofstadt, or the Green parties across the European Union that will be now the new kingsmaker, since there's no clear leader between the Socialist Party or the Conservative Party that usually share the responsibility of the development of the European Union. Now they will have to build alliances with those new centrist forces that have a very ambitious agenda for the European Union.
Let me move on to this large turnout at the polls that everyone seems to be talking about. So why do you think so many people showed up in droves to vote? This was the highest voter turnout in EU elections in 20 years.
Well, generally, people were less interested in the European Union, more focused into national politics. Obviously, the debate around Brexit, different policies in terms of what should be the future of the European Union towards being more federalist, more united, or actually towards more nationalism is a key debate over the last 2 to 3 years. And more importantly, we're seeing the geopolitical shift across the world with a very aggressive Trump administration, with a key position that the European Union has to decide towards Russia, towards China, and this understanding that those decisions cannot be only taken at the national level, but the European Union now is actually a key central actor of the future of the political and economic situation across the continent. So more and more people decide to either limit this potential surge of nationalistic party and actually be much more ambitious for the European Union towards maybe a more federalistic and more sustainable green European Union in the future.
All right, Remi Piet joining us live from Miami. Thank you.
My pleasure, Asieh.